everyone, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me here at Cheaha Park and Zoo in Albany, Georgia. My name is Ashley and we're going to be talking about artificial selection. If you'll give me just a moment, we're going to share our screen. So I've prepared a small presentation. All right, thank you so much for bearing with me. All right, so artificial selection is also known as selective breeding, and it is a little bit different than natural selection. We'll talk about those differences in just a moment. But first, I want you to think of an animal or even a plant that has been bred for desired traits. The first thing that came to my mind as far as an animal goes is a Dachshund, also known as a weenie dog or a sausage dog. And that's because they have short, compact bodies, but their abdomens are elongated. And that's because these dogs are really great for hunting and flushing game. They're small and compact, so they are easily able to go into areas where there might be briars, or maybe it's too tight of an area for humans to squeeze. And so these animals are really great at getting into holes and sometimes capturing small prey, or just luring them or pushing them to the area where the hunter might be or needs them to go. Another example too, I just thought about is, German Shepherds are really popular dogs, and they're very loyal. They make great companions because of their personalities and their traits. And so a lot of the times people breed these dogs because not only are they loyal, protective, but they're also very pretty. So sometimes people want all white shepherds. Sometimes people are looking for black and tan shepherds. There's all different types of coats. And this is an example of artificial selection. If you put two dogs together and allow for them to breed, knowing that they're going to be able to produce a specific looking coat. So that's an example of artificial selection, especially with dog breeds, which is very popular. Natural selection, on the other hand, is based on adaptive characteristics that animals portray. And so adaptive characteristics are going to be a bit different. These are characteristics that animals are naturally going to produce. These are characteristics that are desirable to the animals and allow for them to be able to survive or increase their chances of survival. And a really cool example that I actually saw, this was a defense mechanism. There is a beetle that it's a beetle that actually excretes this really nasty waste from out of its abdomen, and it keeps frogs, even though frogs will eat them, it'll excrete the waste and it'll taste really bad to the frog, and the frog will actually spit it out so that the beetle still has a chance to survive. So I thought that that was really neat. So again, artificial selection is something where, humans are involved, and they choose desirable characteristics that they would like to see expressed in the animal. So this is only beneficial, though, if the favorable traits are inherited over the successive generations by natural selection. So natural selection still plays a part in artificial selection, but artificial selection in the end is actually going to play a bigger role because that is the human selecting both specimens. All right, so SSP actually does play a role. We're going to talk about what it is and how it plays a role here at Cheaha Park. So SSP stands for Species Survival Plan, and so institutions that have animals that are considered SSP, they work with both large and small facilities to help manage populations of animals. So this could be, somewhere like Cheaha, where we have red wolves and we have two, but maybe there's another red wolf that lives in North Carolina that has the genetics that they're looking to express. And they know that one of the red wolves we have would be able to pair really well and express those desired traits with the red wolf that lives in North Carolina. So they would say, hey, can you either bring your red wolf up here, or we're going to bring one to you? Or the faster and less stressful way to do it is to actually take samples from both specimens and study them, and then look to see which ones what's going to be expressed over time. And then they can actually send samples down here where our animal can then easily be able to produce offspring without having to physically have the animal here, and vice versa. All right, and now we are going to move on. All right, so, oh, sorry, I'm having some issues over here with sharing my screen. My apologies. Okay, so artificial selection is important because it's going to allow for us to increase or manage populations so that they are stable. Like I had mentioned before, we actually manage populations of red wolves. So we currently have 2 red wolves here. We have Ghost, who is our male, and Wea, who is our female. And we're going to talk about artificial selection when we watch a video that was put together by our zookeeper Taylor, who is the primary keeper for our red wolves. But one of the reasons why we actually got Ghost last fall was because Ghost was younger and he was able to hopefully help us produce more pups. And Patriot was the old red wolf that we had that he no longer needed to be in a breeding facility. He needed to live where he would be able to actually live out the rest of his life and not have to worry about having any pups. So we brought Ghost in, and he's younger and he's got very valuable genetics, which would pair really well with Wea, our female. So we had coordinators that allowed for us to be able to move Patriot to an area where he would be able to live worry-free, enjoy roaming, play a lot, and have, you know, all the most amazing carnivorous meals he could ever want. However, Wea is a younger female, so she would also be in a really good age to be able to produce healthy pups. So let's see. All right, so artificial selection does help animal populations, whether it helps us maintain the populations we already have, increase populations if necessary. It's also going to help us increase genetic variation so that we have more genes and more like animals to pull from, so it's not the same animals breeding, whether it's, you know, their choice or humans play a role in that. This is going to allow for those animals to have a more healthy, have more healthy offspring, and also be able to feel more comfortable in their environment or in their habitat. It's also going to help increase desired genes, characteristics, and behaviors. And it's going to help decrease genetic issues, also known as maladaptive characteristics. So these are things that we don't want, and it's going to help us actually monitor more closely which animals are able to breed with each other so that we have healthier offspring in the future. So animals are selected sometimes if, you know, a keeper sees that they have a very healthy, now this is not here at Chehaw, but just in general, specimens can be candidates. And so they have SSP managers. And again, this is the expert advisor that works with a specific species. And this is what they do. They have these things that are called stud books, and they actually will take like a specimen like Ghost, the red wolf, and a specimen like Wea, and they'll pair their genes together to see what the potential offspring would, how they would look like, how healthy they would be, what their, to make sure that they would develop properly as far as their internal organs go. Because that's also an issue that can occur when you have, let's go back to that prior slide, we talked about decreasing genetic issues or decreasing the amount of maladaptive characteristics, genes, and behaviors that animals can produce genetically and phenotypically. This is going to help make sure that animals are born with the proper amount of organs, and that, you know, organs are working properly, or that they're not going to be born with a cleft palate, which would cause issues with being able to eat, closing their mouth. It would also cause breathing issues. So those are a couple of examples of things that we don't want to happen. And so artificial selection can help make sure that these genetics and these variables are not passed on. All right, so Cheetah does utilize artificial selection, and we actually do in a couple of different species that we have here on the park that we're going to talk about. So the first are cheetahs. So we currently have 3 male cheetahs. They are brothers. Right now, our cheetahs are not breeding. We were actually involved in a program back a couple of years ago, and we had female cheetahs, and our female cheetahs were actually, they were being studied. Their hormones were being studied. Now, our females were not bred. Our males are not being bred or artificially selected to be parents. However, we were working with another organization to study the hormones in female cheetahs, and we were looking at the age, we were looking at cheetahs in captivity and the overall health of the cheetah. So even though animals might not necessarily be bred with each other, or just bred in general, their health and their overall species and population and genetics are being looked at. So in this situation, we had 3 males, like we currently have 3 males that came from the same litter. So all 3 of those males their genetics are being looked at. And the 3 females that we had before, their genetics from that litter were being looked at. So they're not just looking at animals to breed, they're also just looking at the populations and making sure that the animals that have bred together do have healthy offspring. And then as those offspring are growing up, that they're healthy, and they're also looking at just general populations and families to see, you know, if animals were able to choose who they bred with, what those genetics are looking like. Because this is also going to help scientists determine what kind of traits they would like to be or like to have bred to, possibly have a healthier cheetah in the future. So southern black rhino, we actually did have samples taken from our southern black rhinos that we used to have 2. They were brothers, and if you know anything about rhinos, you might already know that males are solitary. They're also very territorial, even with their own brothers. So we had 2 brothers, Sam and W. W was a really great genetic candidate. So he was actually transferred to another zoo where he could live with a female and hopefully have offspring where they would be able to live stress-free, have offspring, and be able to raise them. This is also going to help increase that genetic diversity. It's going to help relieve stress for both the males that we had here in our population, and it's going to help reinforce some of those natural characteristics that male and female rhinos have in the wild. Therefore, they can recreate those here in captivity. And again, it's going to help increase the population and ensure that we have healthy offspring with that are going to be able to produce those desired traits. Colobus monkeys. So this one is a little bit of a different situation. So our colobus monkeys, right now, we are not looking to have any more colobus monkeys. So our vet has worked very closely with us to make sure that instead of increasing our populations at the moment, that we are just maintaining the population we have. So we have put forth an effort to make sure that our female colobus monkey isn't going to have any more offspring for the time being. She currently has a juvenile monkey in her care named Kenobi, and he's very adorable. And so the reason why we wanted to keep her from having any more babies at the time is because she's still currently taking care of one, and so we don't want to have an overpopulation, and we also just don't want her to constantly breed to where we have so many monkeys that we no longer have an area for them, like a housing area or an exhibit that is the perfect size for them to run and jump and play, because they are a very social group of animals. However, in different facilities based upon the size of the exhibit, and can also help determine how many animals you have. So at this time, it's not recommended that we breed our colobus monkeys, but if for some reason something happens and the captive population or even the wild population show that the monkeys that we have should need to increase population or reproduce, then we could take measures to help that happen. All right, so we're actually going to look at, oh, I'm sorry, before we move on, I got really excited talking about the animals that we have here and how Chiha's involved in SSP that I forgot to show you the videos. These videos are of the animals that we have here in our collection. The first one you're going to see is a video of our, oh, just kidding. These are our warty pigs. Give me, well, you know, we're going to look at the warty pigs. I'll show you what they look like. Cute. All right, so that was not the video that I meant to show you, so I apologize for that. However, you did get to see one of our Vizian warty pigs safely paint with our keeper, Shireen. So that was still a treat either way. But warty pigs are actually SSP animals, so they are what we call, they are the yellow SSP, which means they are critically endangered. So they actually do have very low populations. We have two. We have males, and they are brothers. So we are not looking to breed them anytime soon. However, we do participate in SSP and have many different species of animals that are SSP. So just because the animals are not currently breeding or going to be bred in the future doesn't mean that educating guests and keeping them in captive populations isn't equally important, because it is. And the warty pigs are adorable, and I don't know about you, but I enjoyed seeing them paint, so that was really awesome. And he seemed to be having a really good time eating his sweet potato. All right, so hopefully this is the correct video. All right, it's Shireen again. All right. So I don't know about you, but that was really cute. I always enjoy watching Sam, our rhino, train. So that's actually moving into how we get animals ready, not just how we select animals, but now we're going to talk about how we get animals ready for a transfer, if they are going to breed, if it's important for the animal to physically go to the desired facility. That training session that you just watched is actually what we did with W before he moved on to his new home with his female friend. So our keepers have to work very, very hard to not only reinforce positive behaviors and things that we want the animals to do, to teach them to do what we need them to do. That helps us in the long run, not just for veterinary care, but also to relieve stress on the animals. So she was getting ready to shift the rhino onto exhibit for the morning because they do go up in the evenings. They go into a house that protects them from the elements, possibly wild animals, because we are out in a more natural setting. And so Shireen was giving him different types of fruits and vegetables to reward him for his hard work. Um, so with that, in order to transfer an animal, we have to not only provide veterinary care and check on them, kind of like when you go to the doctor and you get a checkup or a wellness check. We do the same thing with our animals to make sure that they are healthy enough to be transferred, but also to make sure that we are sending them to a facility that is that they're healthy when they're on the way and whenever they get there. But we also want to make sure that the animal is going to survive, once they get there, and they're going to be in a really great environment and receive the best care. So we make sure that the animals are up to date on all of their vaccinations. We do a full workup. We also do a blood draw. We also take samples of their feces, so we can send it off and make sure that, again, they are as healthy as they possibly can be before they go, because again, if they're going to breed offspring, we don't want there to be anything that's going to make them sick or keep them from being as healthy as they possibly can during this process. And then the shift that you saw that the rhino was about to make onto the exhibit for the morning is actually very similar to what we had the rhino do to shift him um, into a container where he would be able to be transported to his new facility. So you just saw a glimpse of what Shireen and many of the other keepers had to do to try and get the animals to work with them to make artificial selection possible. And it also makes transfers possible, and again, less stressful on the animals. And so they associate training sessions with positivity because they are receiving treats in return. It's kind of like, if you make a really good grade and you get a treat, like you get to go get ice cream. Well, then, oh, well, if I make good grades, I not only have really good grades in school, but I'm getting ice cream, or I'm getting something that makes me happy. So we do the same thing with our animals, and it incentivizes them and makes them want to do more of what we need them to do. Again, this goes back to relieving any stress on our animals, which is at the end of the day is going to make them happier and healthier. So next we've got the colobus monkeys. Again, we talked about how at this time we're not currently breeding the colobus monkeys. Now we've got the red wolves, and you're about to see Wea. Wea is our female that I had mentioned earlier, and Taylor is going to be talking about Wea and SSP and how red wolves are involved with SSP here at Cheehaw. All right, so we're gonna stop there. So Taylor did touch on a lot of what I had already talked about increasing our genetic pool, making sure that we have different animals to breed and to choose from to be able to breed, whether it's pairing the animals together or helping the process along um, by involving a little bit more science and help from our keepers and our veterinary staff. Um, so red wolves are also other animals that we have that are part of SSP because, again, they have very small numbers. Taylor did touch on some of the issues that they can have genetically without having a large genetic pool to choose from. We're going to look at some other animals here, and these are the African straw-colored fruit bats, and they are adorable. But I do want to talk about ways that our keepers and staff at here at Cheehaw and staff at other zoos are able to work to try and increase populations or maintain them, or sometimes just kind of test to see where animals are with breeding or the interest in breeding. So first off, before we look at our straw-colored fruit bats, I want to go back to the rhinos and talk about one of the ways that we were able to figure out if our male rhinos were interested in any ladies. Our some female rhinos at another facility were in what's called an estrus cycle, which helps us figure out if they're old enough and if they are like physically ready to breed. So they'll take samples of their feces or their poop and they will put it in a tube. So they'll put the female's poop in a tube, like a very small ball of it, put it in a PVC pipe and put holes in the PVC pipe to where the poop can actually be smelled through the holes by the rhino. And then they'll place it where the rhino is or in an area where the rhino can roam so the rhino doesn't feel like it's stuck near the poop if it doesn't want to be near it. And it has the choice to either, venture over to it or stay away from it. And then they would also put the same kind of pipe that looks exactly the same visually, except they would put like something that smells good to us, like the vanilla extract or something like that. And they'd put it in the exhibit 2. And so they would test to see, number one, if the male rhino was interested in the female's feces, because there's different types of hormones that are released in the feces that would either interest the male or just kind of like, he probably wouldn't show any interest. And then with the vanilla extract being put in there, it would also let the male rhino have a choice if he wanted to play with enrichment or if he viewed the poop as just enrichment or if he viewed it as something more that was enticing to him. And so from our tests, we were able to figure out that the males were actually enticed by the female rhino poop and they thought it was something that was really interesting. So that let us know that our males were interested in the females and they were able to pick up on those hormones from the poop of the female rhinos. Another aspect of artificial selection that we have to think about is, again, we were talking about prepping animals to get them ready for a transfer for artificial selection or just for breeding in general. And so one of the things that we have to look at is we have to make sure overall that, again, the animals are healthy. And before the animals can leave, they actually have to be, again, they have to take samples of their feces or their poop and they have to test it to make sure that it's parasite free. And they would do the same thing if they were going to send an animal here to Cheehaw. And so this is something that all facilities would do on a regular basis to make sure their animals are safe and healthy, but they would also do it in a time that they would want an animal to breed because they don't want the animals to have to worry about being sick. All right, give me just a moment. And click back over to my screen. Oopsie. All right, so that was adorable. If you'd like to see more of that video, you are more than welcome to check it out at our Chiha YouTube page. So I wanted to show you that video because Taylor touched on it. So the straw-colored fruit bats are one of the coolest animals that we have here at Chiha, and I say that because in my opinion, I think they're one of the coolest because they actually go through a process that is called embryonic diapause. So she talked about it a little bit, how they will actually stop uh, allowing for their fetuses to develop right before they're about to take flight because around that time, before they make this really big migration, the food sources that they would usually eat, like the fruits and the vegetables and the flowers that they would eat, would die off or dry out. So they need to go somewhere where it's well moisturized and where there's plenty of food for them to choose from. So they'll go through embryonic diapause where they will no longer be the fetus will no longer develop. And then once they make it to the area that they need to go to during this migration, where there's plenty of food, like she said, that's when they're going to eat lots and lots and lots of food, which is going to help their baby develop. So then the development of the fetus will continue. And so again, that process is called embryonic diapause. And we're going to go back to my screen here in just a moment. And oh no, okay, so that looks like it's the end of my presentation, but I do want to go back and talk for just a moment about the artificial selection and just kind of review what I had talked about moments earlier. So artificial selection does take place after natural selection has taken place. And so Chehaw here in Albany, Georgia, we do participate in aiding in artificial selection. So it is something that we utilize. We have many different animals that are part of SSP. And so these are some of the animals that we put priority into if it is recommended that they breed. And then again, with artificial selection, we also help maintain populations. So sometimes it's not about always getting animals to reproduce. That's not the purpose of artificial selection. The purpose is to make sure that animal welfare is our number one priority, and making sure that when animals are born and animals do reproduce, that they are born as healthy as they possibly can be, and that we are helping increase populations that need to be increased, but we're also doing it in a way that's keeping all of the animals happy and healthy, whether it's the mom and the dad or it's the offspring. So artificial selection can be very helpful to biologists that are looking to sustainably maintain populations for a long-term period. All right, ladies and gentlemen, does anybody have any questions for me today? No? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to speaking to you again, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.